Welcome and good afternoon. This is Commish Orr, and I have another quick little video here today. If you weren't aware, Sideline Strategy Games has released the 1976 season for Payoff Pitch Baseball in print and PDF. You can head over to the site, sidelinestrategy.com, and go over to the shop to find this. Again, you look for 1976 here. It's $39 for the print set. You can get that with the lefty-righty splits or standard. Or, as always, you can get the PDFs, and the PDFs are currently on sale. Normally $9, they're $7.60 right now. So, highly encourage you to go pick that up if you haven't already, especially if you're interested in the 1976 season. So, the question I had for myself was, how is that going to change my Payoff Pitch League? As you may or may not be aware, I finished my 54-game season with Hall of Famers, 3 teams of Hall of Famers in the American League, 3 teams of Hall of Famers in the National League, and a team of American League and National League non-Hall of Famers, and finished that up. And I'm actually going to be working on a History Maker Baseball project here coming up, with their all-time franchise great sets for all those teams. But I'm also interested in continuing to play Payoff Pitch. And I haven't quite decided exactly what I'm going to do yet, but I'm leaning towards just redrafting the teams, the Hall of Fame teams, and then maybe tweaking the non-Hall of Fame teams. The Detroit Rockets, the non-Hall of Fame American League team, actually won the World Series over the St. Louis Wizards. And so I may leave them pretty much as is and see if any other team can top them. But in any event, if you're not familiar with the league, again, 3 teams of Hall of Famers and a team of non-Hall of Fame great players. And because Payoff Pitch doesn't have cards for every season, in some cases, I have picked a season for a player, usually the Hall of Fame players, that isn't necessarily their best, because their best season just isn't. They don't have a card for it. So that's kind of what I've done in the past. So as new seasons get released for Payoff Pitch, I will be updating these players to especially if whatever season is released has a better season for some of these players that I can use. So when the 1976 season got released, I took some time to look through to see if there would be any players who I would update based on the 1976 stats, in which case the 1976 stats were better than whatever stats I had been using. And so what I did was, I have a nice little spreadsheet here, a nice little Excel sheet that I keep track of the league in, and the teams and all of that. And I have the player pool here. And the player pool was originally just all of the Hall of Fame players dumped into it. And then I added in the non-Hall of Fame players so that I have access to all of that. And all I had to do here, because I didn't want to look through every player, I just sorted by career. And I just went down until I found players that were playing in the mid-70s to see if any of them were better in the 1976 season than the season I was using. So I'm using Baseball Reference. I just went through player by player and checked them out. And after all of that, there were only 2 players that I think I will be using from the 1976 set. One of those, let me see here. One of those is Joe Morgan. So Joe Morgan had an amazing year in 1976. And if we look him up, Look up good old Joe Morgan here. We see 1976 that he had a 320 batting average, 444 on base, 576 slugging, an OPS over 1. Great season for Joe Morgan. 60 stolen bases. He was MVP that year. And I had been using, if I go back to my little cheat sheet here, and see if I can track down Joe Morgan on here. I think I passed him. Did I pass him? There he is. I had been using the 1973 season for Joe Morgan. So the card I'd been using was 1973. If we look at 1973 compared to 1976, in 76 he had a better batting average by 30 points. He had a better on base by 38 points. He had a better slugging by not 100 points, but quite a few. He did have more stolen bases in 73 than he did in 76, but other than that, all the way around, better stats. So, for sure, Joe Morgan is going to be upgraded, if you will. In fact, I think he had the best. Yeah, he led in wins above replacement that year. The second player that will be upgraded is Frank Tanana, who actually was on the Detroit Rockets, since Tanana is not a Hall of Famer. And so I had been using his 1977 season. And we can look down here at 77. I mean, not as clear cut as Joe Morgan, but if we look, 76 he had a better record, which doesn't play into his stats, I don't believe. He had a better ERA, pitch more innings. If we come over here to his rate stats, if you will, we see his ERA plus was better in 77 than it was in 76, but he gave up fewer hits. About the same in home runs, about the same in walks, but he struck out a few more. So overall, I think he's marginally better in 76 than he was in 77, so probably we'll upgrade him based on that. And then, of course, the other thing I did was I came to Baseball Reference. I went to seasons and looked at all seasons. And then I just went down to 76 and clicked on 76. And then I went to the leaders. And I went to the batting and pitching leaders here. Expanded the leaderboards. Yep, Joe Morgan right there on top. And then I just took a look to see if there were other players that could be upgraded. Now, Schmidt here, number 3. He actually had a better season in 1980 than he had in 76, I believe. So there weren't any other players that were that were clearly better in 76 than they were in the season that I already had for them, other than Joe Morgan and Frank Tanana. Now, there are players who aren't in my league at all. We have the Bird, who had arguably not arguably, he had his best season in 76, one of the all-time great seasons, but did not have a long career, obviously, and so he doesn't make the cut to come into my league because for those non-Hall of Fame teams, I'm really focused on guys that had longevity, were great, and just not quite Hall of Fame, not quite in the Hall of Fame, and he wouldn't be even close. So unfortunately, so he had a good season, of course, but not enough to join the league, if you will. And that's the same for some of these other guys who had who were on the leaderboards in 1976. I think pitching, there were a couple guys that, yeah, Vita Blue was another one I took a look at, but again, not quite good enough to join the league on the non-Hall of Fame team. So that's kind of what I did, as I just went through and made sure I wasn't missing anybody. Now, the other thing I'm kind of waiting for before starting my season 2, if you will, of the Payoff Pitch League is I'm waiting for the end of the regular season because there will most definitely be retirees. And so when players retire, they become eligible to be on the non-Hall of Fame team, because that's the other stipulation for the non-Hall of Fame teams is they have to be retired players. And so that's how Albert Pujols joined the league midway through last year, because I started before the season ended, the last season ended, and then Pujols retired. So he joined the league that way. And I'm sure there will be other players retiring this year. And when they do, they'll become eligible to join this league. And if they are better than the players that are already on the team, then they'll bump that spot. So that's kind of my the way I run things and my plan. Again, 76 seasons, only going to upgrade 2 of the players in this league. I do plan to redraft most likely, other than the non-Hall of Fame teams. So that should be interesting. And then as more seasons get released, I'll add players in here. There are also quite a few Hall of Fame players that aren't in the league because Payoff Pitch didn't have the seasons in question for them to be in the league. So especially the older Hall of Fame players pre, the early 1900s. The earliest season Payoff Pitch has carded is 1921. So that cuts out like people like Christy Mathewson and so forth, Honus Wagner. So some of those players just can't get into the league because they're not carded. In any event, thought I would do a quick update, to make you aware of the 1976 season, encourage you, especially if you play Payoff Pitch, to pick that up, and B, to talk about how that would affect my league when I start it back up. With all that said, if you have any questions, leave those down in the comment. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a great evening.